The crystal spire reached toward the stars like a frozen scream. Inside its glowing halls, Ambassador Hyunwoo stood perfectly still as Counselor Veltar spoke about humans like they were pets. "These creatures show promise," Veltar said to the other council members. His voice echoed in the massive chamber. "Perhaps in a few thousand years they might evolve enough to serve us properly." The other counselors laughed. Their sounds filled the air like breaking glass. Hyunwoo kept his face calm. He had practiced this expression for 3 years. Behind him, his aide Bora shifted her weight. She was angry. Hyunwoo could feel it without looking at her. "Ambassador," Counselor Thexani spoke next. Her voice was like ice scraping metal. "Your species owes us the monthly tribute. Where is it?" Hyunwoo bowed his head. The motion made his stomach turn, but he did it anyway. "Honored Counselor, Earth has prepared the tribute as requested. 60% of our food production, 40% of our manufactured goods. The shipments are ready." "Good," Thexani said. She did not look at him when she spoke. "But we need more workers for the mining colonies. Send us 50,000 humans. Young ones work better." Bora's breath caught. Hyunwoo heard it clearly in the silent chamber. His own heart stopped for a moment. 50,000 people. Sent to mines where most would die within a year. He had seen the reports. He knew what happened to workers in council mines. "I will discuss this with Earth leadership," Hyunwoo said. His voice stayed steady. Years of training kept it level. "You will do more than discuss," Veltar said. He leaned forward in his crystal throne. "You will obey. That is what lower species do. They obey their betters." The word betters hit Hyunwoo like a punch. His left hand tightened into a fist behind his back. Bora could not see it. The counselors could not see it. But his knuckles went white with the pressure. "Of course, honored counselor," Hyunwoo said. He bowed again. The movement felt like swallowing poison. "Your species has been very accommodating," another counselor said. This one was Kexron, whose people had conquered 12 star systems before humans ever left Earth. "It shows wisdom. Most new species fight us at first. They learn better eventually." "What happened to the ones who kept fighting?" Bora asked. The words came out before she could stop them. The chamber went quiet. All 12 counselors turned to look at her. Hyunwoo's heart hammered in his chest. Speaking without permission was forbidden for aides. Kexron smiled. His teeth were sharp and yellow. "They learned to be quiet permanently." Bora's face went pale. Hyunwoo stepped slightly in front of her. "My aide is young," he said quickly. She meant no disrespect. "See that she learns proper behavior," Thexani said. "We would hate for something unfortunate to happen to her." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Hyunwoo nodded. "She will learn." The council session continued for 2 more hours. They discussed human mining quotas, food shipments, and population relocations like they were talking about moving cargo. Not people, not families, just numbers on reports. When it finally ended, Hyunwoo walked slowly back to his quarters. Bora followed in silence. The Crystal Spire's halls were beautiful and terrible. Light danced through the walls in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small. It worked. In his private rooms, Hyunwoo finally let his shoulders slump. The perfect posture he maintained in public melted away. Bora sat heavily in a chair across from his desk. 50,000 people, she said quietly. They want 50,000 of our people to die in their mines. I know, Hyunwoo said. He walked to the window. Outside, alien ships moved between the spire's towers like schools of metal fish. I know exactly what they want. How can you stay so calm? Bora asked. Her voice cracked. How can you bow and smile when they talk about us like animals? Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. On his desk sat a photo of his family back on Earth. His sister Mi-young in her military uniform, his parents in their garden, his little niece, Soo-jin, holding a flower. Because getting angry won't save those 50,000 people, he said finally. Staying calm might. Bora stared at him. How? Hyunwoo picked up the photo. Mi-young looked strong and confident in the picture. She had always been the fighter in the family. He had always been the diplomat. My sister once told me something, he said. She said that the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. What weapon? Bora asked. We don't have weapons. The council made sure of that. No military ships, no defensive systems, no weapons manufacturing. They control everything. Hyunwoo set the photo down carefully. They control everything they know about. Before Bora could ask what he meant, Hyunwoo's communication device chimed. An urgent message from Earth. He opened it and read quickly. His expression changed, just slightly. But Bora noticed. What is it? She asked. Earth wants to talk, Hyunwoo said. He stood up and walked to his secure communication terminal. Privately, the hologram that appeared showed President Jin-ae. Behind her stood Admiral Mi-young. Both women looked serious. Brother, Mi-young said. Her voice was different than in the photo, harder. We got your report about the mining demand. 50,000 people, Hyunwoo said. They want them young and healthy. President Jin-ae nodded grimly. We expected this. The council always pushes until they find a line we won't cross. Have we found that line? Hyunwoo asked. Mi-young leaned forward. We found it 3 years ago. We've just been preparing ever since. Hyunwoo felt something shift in his chest. A feeling he had buried for 3 years. Hope. What kind of preparing? He asked. The kind the council told us we couldn't do, Jin-ae said. The kind that breaks their rules, all of their rules. On the hologram, Mi-young smiled. It was not a nice smile. Remember when we were kids and you would distract Mom while I snuck cookies from the kitchen? Hyunwoo almost smiled back. You were always better at the sneaking part. Still am, Mi-young said. But this time we weren't sneaking cookies. We were sneaking something much more useful. What do you need me to do? Hyunwoo asked. Keep being the perfect diplomat, President Jin-ae said. For just a little longer. Can you do that? Hyunwoo looked at Bora. She was listening carefully, but did not understand what they were really talking about. He looked at the photo on his desk. He thought about 50,000 people being sent to die in council mines. How much longer? He asked. Tomorrow, Mi-young said. One more day of bowing and smiling. After that, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. I understand, Hyunwoo said. The hologram ended. The room was quiet except for the hum of the spire's energy systems. Bora stared at him. What just happened? She asked. Hyunwoo walked back to the window. Outside, the alien ships continued. Their dance between the towers. Beautiful and deadly and completely unaware that anything was about to change. Tomorrow the council will see something they have never seen before, he said quietly. What? Hyunwoo's reflection looked back at him from the window. For 3 years, that face had been carefully controlled. Polite, respectful, harmless. Tomorrow, it would be something else entirely. They will see what humans look like when we stop being polite, he said. Bora felt a chill run down her spine. Something in his voice had changed, something that made her think of storms gathering on distant horizons. Should I be scared? She asked. Hyunwoo turned away from the window. For just a moment his diplomatic mask slipped. What she saw underneath was not anger. It was something much more dangerous. It was patience finally coming to an end. Not of us, he said. Never of us. The 4th day of the siege became a masterclass in human warfare, and Commander Thrax was an unwilling student learning lessons he had never wanted to know. Explain to me again how 12 primitive ships are destroying my invasion force. He demanded from his command center, watching tactical displays that showed chaos where there should have been order. His tactical officer gestured helplessly at the screens. They don't fight like any species we've encountered, sir. Traditional military doctrine says smaller forces should either retreat or mass for concentrated attacks. The humans do neither. On the displays, human ships darted between Vorthak vessels, like angry insects. But there was a method to their seemingly chaotic movement that was becoming clear to everyone except the Vorthak themselves. "They're hurting us," the tactical officer continued, his voice filled with reluctant admiration. "Each attack isn't meant to destroy our ships directly. They're forcing us to move in specific directions, pushing us into positions where we can't use our numbers effectively." Admiral Sun Wuhan had indeed developed what his staff called the Shepherd strategy. Instead of trying to match the Vorthak's superior firepower directly, human ships used their speed and maneuverability to control where the battle took place. "Major Dong Hyun Park, execute Thunder Run 7, the admiral commanded from his flagship. "Push their heavy cruisers toward the asteroid field. Captain Boram Lim, are your Marines ready for tunnel insertion?" "Ready and waiting, sir," came the reply from the planet's surface. Colonial guides are in position. The coordination between space combat and ground operations was something the Vorthak had never seen before. In most species' military thinking, space battles and ground battles were separate events. Humans treated them as parts of a single integrated campaign. Deep in the mining tunnels, Tai-Min Kim watched the tactical displays that Junho Lee had managed to connect to the human communication networks. The scope of the battle was becoming clear, and it was unlike anything he had imagined. "They're not trying to defeat the Vorthak fleet directly," Wu Sung-kang observed, his pilot's training helping him understand the human strategy. "They're trying to rescue us while making it too expensive for the Vorthak to continue the siege. But there are still 40,000 Vorthak warriors on the planet," Mi Young Seo pointed out. "Even if the space battle is going well, we're still outnumbered on the ground." That was where Captain Boram Lim and her Marines came in. The human ground forces had turned the colony's mining tunnel system into a three-dimensional battlefield that played to every human strength while exploiting every Vorthak weakness. "The enemy is used to fighting on flat surfaces with clear lines of sight," Captain Lim explained to her unit commanders. "Down in those tunnels, their numerical advantage means nothing. Their heavy weapons can't be used effectively, and they don't know the terrain like our colonial guides do." The tunnel rats, as they called themselves, began operations that seemed impossible to outside observers. Small teams of human Marines, guided by colonial defenders who knew every pipe and passage, began appearing inside Vorthak positions like ghosts. "Contact left!" a Vorthak warrior shouted as human soldiers emerged from a maintenance shaft that supposedly led to an abandoned sector. Before his unit could respond, the humans had disappeared back into the tunnel system, leaving behind damaged equipment and confusion. "They're using our own mining infrastructure against us," reported a Vorthak squad leader whose unit had been ambushed 3 times in 2 hours. "The tunnels connect everything. They can appear anywhere and vanish before we can respond." But the real revolution in the battle came from something the Vorthak had never considered. The colonial defenders weren't just being rescued. They were active participants in their own salvation. So-Ra Park had turned her medical skills into tactical advantages. "Human Marines have different physiology than colonial species," she reported to both human and alien medics. "But Carathian healing techniques work on human injuries, and human medicine can treat skyfish trauma. We're sharing medical knowledge across species lines." The result was field hospitals, where human medics learned alien healing techniques while alien healers studied human anatomy. Wounded Marines were treated by Melodian healers whose crystal songs accelerated healing. Injured colonists received human military-grade medical care that saved lives that would have been lost. Hye Jin Choi was coordinating something even more remarkable: mixed-species tactical units. "The children have been playing together for years," she explained to Captain Lim. "The human children know skyfish flying patterns. The alien children understand human tactical thinking. They're our best translators for cross-species coordination." Soon, human Marines were using skyfish scouts for aerial reconnaissance while Carathian workers provided heavy lifting for equipment that would have required machinery. Melodian crystal singers created communication networks that couldn't be jammed by Vorthak technology. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Sun Wuhan reported to Earth Command. "We're not just fighting alongside aliens. We're learning from them in real time and adapting our tactics based on their capabilities. The tactical advantages are extraordinary, Dr. Yujin No, the fleet's xenobiologist, was documenting everything. Each species brings unique advantages, she noted. Skyfish provide aerial mobility in environments where our aircraft can't operate. Carathians can move through terrain that would stop our vehicles. Melodians can communicate across vast distances without technology. But perhaps the most important discovery was psychological. The colonial defenders, who had been demoralized and desperate 3 days earlier, were now fighting with a determination that impressed even veteran human Marines. "I've never seen anything like it," reported Sergeant Chan Young Kim, a Marine who had fought in a dozen campaigns. "These aliens are fighting like their lives depend on it, but also like they're protecting something precious. They take risks to save each other that trained soldiers wouldn't normally take." The answer came from Ambassador Kelros, who had been working with human officers to coordinate diplomatic aspects of the battle. "You have to understand," he explained to a group of human tactical planners. "Most species fight for survival, territory, or resources. But what we built here was different. This colony represents the idea that different species can become one people. That's worth dying for." The Vorthak were learning this lesson in the most painful way possible. Their warriors were trained to fight enemies who would surrender when the cost became too high. But the colonial defenders weren't calculating costs and benefits. They were protecting their home, their community, their family. "Status report," Commander Thrax demanded as his forces were pushed back from another sector. "We control 60% of the planet's surface, but none of the strategic locations," his lieutenant reported reluctantly. "The mining complex remains in enemy hands. Our supply lines are under constant attack, and our casualties are mounting faster than expected. How many warriors have we lost? 12,000 dead or wounded, sir. The humans have lost maybe 200 Marines, but they're fighting alongside thousands of colonial defenders who seem willing to die before surrendering." Thrax stared at the tactical displays. In 3 decades of conquest, he had never seen anything like this battle. Species that should have surrendered days ago were fighting harder with each passing hour. An invasion that should have been over in hours had become a grinding campaign with no end in sight. And the space battle? "We've lost 37 ships. The humans have lost 3. The numbers were impossible, but they were also undeniable. 12 human ships had not only survived against a fleet of 200 Vorthak vessels, they were winning." As the 4th night fell over Kepler 442b, the situation had completely reversed from the desperate hours of the 3rd day. The colonists were no longer trapped and hopeless. They were part of a coordinated defense that was pushing back an invasion force 10 times their size. In the deep tunnels that had been their refuge, alien children now played games where they pretended to be human Marines. Human adults told stories to mixed groups of youngsters, weaving together tales from Earth's history and the legends of a dozen different worlds. "What happens after we win?" asked a young Carathian, whose family had been saved by human medics. Taimin. Kim looked around at the mixed community of beings who had become far more than just neighbors during their shared ordeal. Humans and aliens planning tactics together. Different species sharing food, medical supplies, and hopes for the future. "We rebuild," he said simply. "All of us, together. We make this place into something even better than it was before." But first they had to finish teaching the Vorthak their lesson about what happened when humans decided something was worth protecting. The lesson was far from over. The sound was wrong. Taemin Kim had been listening to Vorthak war machines for 3 days. He knew the deep rumble of their drilling equipment, the sharp whine of their energy weapons, the heavy footsteps of their warriors. But this sound was different, lighter, faster, and it was coming from the sky. "Do you hear that?" Sora Park asked, looking up from the wounded patient she was treating. Around them in the deep tunnel, other beings were raising their heads, listening to something that didn't fit the pattern of the siege. The sound grew louder. Not the mechanical thunder of Vorthak machines, but something else. Something that made the rock walls vibrate in a different rhythm. Then the first explosion echoed down the shaft. But it wasn't the controlled demolition sound they had been hearing as the Vorthak slowly broke through their defenses. This was sudden, violent, and came from above ground. Then another, and another. What's happening up there? Woo-Sung Kang asked, his pilot's ear better at identifying different types of engines than anyone else in the colony. Those aren't Vorthak ships. The engine signatures are all wrong. Junho Lee suddenly grabbed his communication equipment and began frantically adjusting frequencies. I'm getting something, he said, his young voice tight with excitement and disbelief. It's on human emergency channels. The static cleared for just a moment and a voice came through the speakers, a human voice speaking Korean with a military accent that cut through the tunnel like sunlight through darkness. This is Admiral Sun Woo-Han of the Solar Defense Corps to Kepler 442b colony. We received your distress call. Hold your position. Help has arrived. The silence that followed was total. 3,000 beings stared at the communication equipment as if it had just performed a miracle, which, in a way, it had. Human military? Ambassador Kelros whispered, his musical voice filled with wonder. But your nearest base is weeks away. How could they possibly? His question was answered by another series of explosions from above, followed by the screaming whine of ships moving at speeds that seemed impossible in an atmosphere. Through the tunnel system they could hear new sounds. The sharp crack of different energy weapons, the roar of engines that sounded like controlled thunder, and something else they had almost forgotten existed. The sound of Vorthak warriors in confusion. All colonial defenders, this is Captain Borum Lim of the 1st Marine Drop Battalion. A woman's voice cut through the communication static with military precision. We are beginning combat operations. Stay in your defensive positions until we secure the area. Tae-min looked around at the mixed crowd of survivors. Hope was a dangerous thing in their situation, but he could see it spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Children stopped crying. Adults straightened their shoulders. The wounded tried to sit up to hear better. How many ships? He asked Junho. The young communications specialist worked frantically to analyze the signals. I'm reading 12 ships, maybe 13. They're moving too fast for accurate counts. 12 ships, against 200 Vorthak vessels and 47,000 warriors. The numbers were still impossible, but at least now they had company in their impossible situation. The battle above ground was unlike anything the Vorthak had experienced. Commander Thrax had conquered dozens of worlds, defeated hundreds of species, crushed every resistance his forces had encountered, but humans fought differently than any enemy he had faced before. Instead of meeting his massive fleet in direct combat, the human ships scattered in all directions, moving at speeds that seemed reckless in the planet's atmosphere. They struck at supply lines, communication centers, and command posts in a pattern that appeared random but created maximum chaos. Report, Thrax demanded as his command center shook from another surprise attack. The human ships refused to engage in proper formation combat, his lieutenant reported. They attack, retreat, and attack again from unexpected angles. Our gunners cannot establish target locks. And their tactics? What about their tactics? Sir, they appear to be more concerned with protecting civilians than achieving military objectives. 3 of their ships took severe damage while evacuating an alien transport that we had already disabled. It makes no strategic sense. Thrax stared at the tactical display showing the human ships darting between his much larger vessels like insects around giants. They fight to protect aliens they don't even know. What kind of species does that? In the tunnels below, the colonists listened to the battle raging overhead. The sounds of combat were getting closer to the main shaft. But now there were new sounds mixed in with the familiar terror of Vorthak weapons. Human voices on the tactical frequencies, Junho reported. They're coordinating with colonial defense positions. Someone is directing them to our exact locations. But how could they know where we are? Mi-young Seo asked. Their answer came in the form of a transmission on a frequency that had been silent for 3 days. Colonial Command, this is Major Dong-hyun Park of the SDC Tactical Division. We have your mining surveys and tunnel maps from our database. Are you still operational? Tae-min grabbed the communication device with shaking hands. After 3 days of isolation and despair, the simple act of talking to another human felt like a dream. This is Tae-min Kim, Colonial Coordinator. We have 3,000 survivors in the deep mining complex. We can hold our position, but we're low on everything. Understood, Colonial Command. Medical and supply drops are inbound. Prepare for heavy combat in your vicinity. We're coming to get you. Around Taimin, the mixed crowd of aliens was listening with expressions of wonder and confusion. They had heard stories about human military forces but had never seen them in action. The idea that ships from Earth had traveled weeks through space to help a mining colony full of aliens was difficult for many species to understand. Why would they do this? Asked a Carathian elder whose family had been hiding in the tunnels for days. We're not even their species. What do they gain from fighting for us? Before any human could answer, Ambassador Kelros spoke up. His elderly voice carried the wisdom of someone who had spent years studying different species. This is why humans are different, he said. Most species fight for territory, resources, or survival. Humans fight for ideas, for principles, for the belief that some things are worth dying for, even if you don't directly benefit from them. The battle above was reaching its peak. Human ships were now operating in coordinated groups, using tactics that turned their smaller numbers into an advantage. They struck at the flanks of Vorthak formations, forced the larger ships into disadvantageous positions, and used the planet's geography to limit their enemies' movement options. But most importantly, they were doing something the Vorthak had never encountered before. They were inspiring the beings they had come to rescue. Colonial defense units, Captain Boram Lim's voice came through their communications. We need your help. We can keep the Vorthak busy, but we need local knowledge of their positions. Can you provide intelligence on enemy locations? For the first time in 3 days, the colonists weren't just hiding and hoping to survive. They were part of the fight. Again, Wu Sung Kang used his knowledge of aerial routes to guide human fighters to Vorthak air defense positions. Mi Young Seo provided detailed maps of tunnel systems that human marines could use for surprise attacks. He Jin Choi coordinated with civilian groups to mark safe areas for medical evacuations. Even Sora left her medical station to help. I'm receiving wounded from the surface battles, she reported. Human marines and colonial defenders. I need help moving them to safe areas. The response came immediately. Carathian volunteers used their strength to carry stretchers. Skyfish scouts used their speed to deliver medical supplies. Melodian healers shared their knowledge of alien biology with human medics. As the 4th day dawned over Kepler 442b, the impossible was happening. 12 human ships were not just holding their own against a Vorthak invasion force, they were winning. But the real victory was something deeper. In the deep tunnels where alien children played with human toys, where Carathian families shared food with Skyfish refugees, where beings from dozens of worlds worked together to help their rescuers, something new was being born. Look at them, Admiral Sun Wuhan said to his tactical officer as they watched the coordination between human forces and colonial defenders. Different species, different worlds, different languages, but they fight together like they've been one people their whole lives. The intelligence reports were right, sir. The colonists aren't just a collection of different species living in the same place. They've actually become a community. The Admiral nodded, watching as alien scouts guided human marines through tunnel systems, as colonial engineers helped repair damaged human ships, as mixed groups of beings worked together with an efficiency that would be impressive even among trained military units. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Priority message to Earth Command. We've found something here worth fighting for, something worth protecting. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned. The Vorthak were learning that some things couldn't be conquered by force alone. They were learning what happened when humanity decided something was worth protecting. The 3rd day brought despair. Taemin Kim sat in the deepest part of the mining shaft, surrounded by the last 3,000 survivors of a colony that had once housed 50,000 beings. The walls around them were solid rock, carved out by years of careful mining. Above them, 47,000 Vorthak warriors waited to finish what they had started. Water supplies are running low, Mi Young Seo reported. Her botanist training had made her responsible for managing their dwindling resources. Maybe 2 days left if we're very careful. Food for 4 days, but only if we cut portions again. Sora Park looked up from the makeshift medical station where she was treating their wounded. I'm running out of medical supplies too. We have maybe 50 doses of pain medication left and no way to perform serious surgery. The situation was hopeless and everyone knew it. They had fought bravely for 3 days, but bravery couldn't stop energy weapons or war machines. All they had accomplished was to delay their deaths and the destruction of their community. But even worse than the physical situation was what was happening to the people themselves. Some of the alien families are talking, Hyejin Choi said, quietly to Tae-min. She had been moving through the tunnel system trying to keep morale up among the children and civilians. They're scared. They're starting to blame the humans for this. Blame us? Why? They say the Vorthak only want the humans. If we surrender ourselves, maybe the rest can live. Tae-min felt his heart sink. He had seen this before in desperate situations. When people were terrified and trapped, they looked for someone to blame. And humans were easy targets because there were so few of them. Is it true? Asked a young melodian whose crystal song had turned dark and discordant with fear. Would they let us live if they got what they really wanted? Before Tae-min could answer, Ambassador Kelros stepped forward. The elderly Zenthari diplomat had been quiet for most of the siege, but now his musical voice carried clearly through the chamber. I have dealt with the Vorthak before, he said. I know their methods. They do not spare anyone who has resisted them. If we surrender the humans, they will kill us all anyway. The only difference would be that we would die as cowards instead of as friends. But fear was stronger than wisdom in the hearts of desperate people. As the day wore on, Tae-min could see the unity of their community starting to crack. Alien families huddled together and spoke in whispers. Some looked at the humans with growing suspicion. The breaking point came when Commander Thrax made his final offer. His voice boomed through the tunnels from speakers the Vorthak had lowered, down the main shaft. I know you can hear me, creatures of this worthless world. You have fought longer than expected, but your situation is hopeless. However, I am not without mercy. The translation device made his words sound mechanical and cold. Surrender the humans to me for proper questioning, and I will grant the rest of you quick deaths. Continue to shelter them, and I will make sure every one of you dies slowly while listening to the screams of your children. The silence that followed was terrible. In that silence, Tae-min could hear the sound of a community tearing itself apart. Maybe we should consider it, whispered a Carathian elder whose family had been killed in the first day's fighting. Maybe it's the only way to save the children. The humans brought this on us, said another voice from the darkness. They're the ones the Vorthak really want. Why should our families die for them? Sora stood up from her medical station, her hands still covered in the blood of the wounded she had been treating. Because that's what families do, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We protect each other, all of us. Easy words from someone who won't have to watch her children die, snapped a skyfish mother whose wings were too damaged to carry her to safety. The argument spread through the crowd like fire. Species turned against species. Families that had lived in harmony for years suddenly saw each other as strangers. The fear and desperation that had built up over 3 days finally found a target. Tae-min watched his community destroy itself and felt more hopeless than he had at any point since. The invasion began. They had survived the Vorthak weapons and war machines, but they might not survive their own fear. Then Woo-sung Kang stood up. The former cargo pilot was not a natural leader. He preferred flying alone to dealing with people. But he had watched human and alien families work together to build this colony, and he was not going to watch fear tear it apart. 3 days ago, he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the enclosed space. My ship was damaged in the first attack. I was trapped under twisted metal and couldn't move. Do you know who saved me? He pointed to a young Carathian warrior. That one. He lifted 2 tons of debris off my legs while Vorthak energy weapons were shooting all around us. He could have run to safety. Instead, he saved a human he barely knew. Woo-sung turned to face the crowd. Yesterday, when the medical station was overrun, who carried the wounded children to safety? Skyfish scouts who risked their own lives to protect young ones that weren't even their species. He gestured toward Sora's medical area. Look around you. Human doctors treating alien patients, alien healers sharing their knowledge with human medics, Melodian songs helping Karathian children sleep, Xanthari diplomats translating between species so we can work together. His voice grew stronger. The Vorthak don't understand what they're really fighting. They think they're conquering a mining colony. But this isn't just a place where we dig crystals out of the ground. This is our home. All of ours. Built by all of us. Defended by all of us. Wusung looked directly at the beings who had been arguing for surrender. If we give up the humans to save ourselves, what are we saving? A collection of scared aliens hiding in holes? That's not worth preserving. But if we stand together, if we protect each other no matter what species we are, then we're saving something precious. We're saving the idea that different peoples can become one family. The argument died away. In its place came something even more powerful: shame. These beings remembered why they had come to this world. They remembered the dreams they had built together. They remembered that their children played together, learned together, and were now hiding together in the deepest tunnels. A Melodian elder stepped forward, her crystal voice pure and clear. I came to this world because I was tired of the old ways where each species lived alone and trusted no one. My granddaughter's best friend is a human child. I will not betray that friendship now. One by one, other voices joined in. Karathians whose strength had built the colony's foundation. Skyfish whose speed had connected distant settlements. Xanthari, whose wisdom had guided their laws. All remembering that they had chosen to build something new together. But even as their unity was restored, their situation remained hopeless. They were trapped, outnumbered, and running out of everything they needed to survive. Unity was precious, but it couldn't stop energy weapons or create food from empty containers. As the third night fell over Kepler 442b, the survivors prepared for what they all knew would be their last day. The Vorthak had grown tired of waiting. Tomorrow would bring the final assault. In the deepest chamber, alien children slept in the arms of human adults. Human children curled up next to Karathian families. Wounded beings from a dozen species shared blankets and water without thought of who belonged to which world. Sora made her final rounds through the medical station, checking on patients she knew she couldn't save. Myung distributed the last of their food supplies, making sure the children got larger portions. Hae-jin told stories to mixed groups of youngsters, weaving tales from human folklore and alien legends together. Tai-min stood watch at the entrance to their final refuge, listening to the sounds of Vorthak machinery preparing for the assault above. In a few hours, war machines would break through their final barriers. Energy weapons would turn their sanctuary into a tomb. But as he looked back at the community sleeping behind him, he felt something that surprised him. Not despair, but pride. They had built something beautiful here. They had proven that different species could become one people, one family, one community worth dying for. The Vorthak could destroy their bodies, but they couldn't destroy what these beings had created together. The memory of this place, this community, this family, would survive in the hearts of those who had lived here. It would have to be enough. Above them, Commander Thrax prepared his final assault. 47,000 warriors, hundreds of war machines, and enough firepower to level a mountain were focused on eliminating the last 3,000 defenders. Logic said the battle would be over in minutes. Logic said nothing could save the colony now. Logic had never met humans before. The second day began with thunder. Not the natural thunder of storms, but the artificial thunder of Vorthak war machines pounding the colony's defenses into dust. Tai-min Kim crouched behind a broken mining vehicle and watched their carefully planned defensive positions crumble under the assault. Sector 7 is gone, Wusung Kang reported through the static-filled communication system. His voice was calm, but Tai-min could hear the strain underneath. The Karathians held as long as they could, but those energy cannons cut right through their stone barriers. Sora Park's voice came over the radio from the medical station. We have wounded coming in from all sectors. I need more supplies moved down to tunnel level 3. The surface hospitals won't be safe much longer. Through the smoke and dust, Taman could see the Vorthak warriors advancing. They moved like a perfect machine, each soldier knowing exactly where to be and what to do. Their black armor reflected, the fires burning throughout the colony. Their weapons never seemed to run out of energy. "They're not just trying to defeat us," observed Myung-seo, who had crawled up to his position carrying a modified mining laser. "They're trying to terrify us. Look how they destroy everything completely instead of just moving past it." She was right. The Vorthak didn't just capture buildings, they reduced them to rubble. They didn't just defeat defenders, they made sure no trace of resistance remained. This was meant to be a lesson for anyone watching from other worlds. Then, we give them a different kind of lesson, Taman decided. "Hyejin, how many civilians do we still have on the surface?" Hyejin Choi's voice crackled through the radio from deeper in the complex. "Maybe 300, mostly medical staff and volunteers helping with the evacuation. Everyone else is in the deep tunnels." "Good. Wusung, can you get us close to their supply depot?" "That's suicide, Taman. They have it guarded by 50 warriors and 3 war machines." "That's exactly why they won't expect us to try it." The plan was simple, desperate, and completely insane. Using maintenance tunnels that the Vorthak didn't know existed, a small team would try to sabotage the enemy's supply lines. If they could create enough confusion and damage, it might buy more time for the evacuation. The team consisted of 12 beings, 6 humans, and 6 volunteers from other species. They crawled through pipes barely large enough for their bodies, breathing recycled air that tasted of metal and fear. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of battle getting closer to the medical stations. "Remember," Taman whispered as they reached the access point nearest the Vorthak supply depot, "we're not trying to win. We're trying to make them angry enough to make mistakes." The sabotage worked better than they had hoped. The modified mining charges that Mi-young had prepared destroyed 3 supply vehicles and damaged a war machine. More importantly, it forced the Vorthak to pull warriors back from the main assault to secure their supply lines. But the victory was temporary. Within 2 hours, the Vorthak had adjusted their tactics and resumed the attack with even more force than before. Commander Thrax was clearly angry about the surprise strike. "Bring me prisoners." His voice boomed across the colony through captured communication systems. "I want to know how these creatures think. How do they coordinate without proper military structure? How do they fight for aliens they barely know?" The defenders had no choice but to fall back again. The industrial complex was lost. The main hospital was evacuated just minutes before Vorthak warriors smashed through the barriers that Sora had built. The medical staff carried wounded patients down into the tunnel system, working by emergency lighting and fear. In the tunnels, the colony's children huddled together in the deepest chambers. Melodian youngsters sang soft crystal songs to comfort Carathian cubs who were scared of the dark. Skyfish children, unable to fly in the cramped spaces, perched on the shoulders of human adults who told them stories to keep their minds off the danger above. "It's working," Ambassador Kelros said as he helped carry medical supplies deeper into the mountain. "The children are bonding across species lines. Even if we don't survive this, they will remember that different species can care for each other." Sora looked up from the alien patient she was treating. The being was a Skyfish scout who had been injured while guiding human children to safety. "If we don't survive this, who will remember anything?" But even as she spoke, she continued working. That's what humans did. They kept going even when hope was gone. Above ground, the battle continued. The colonists had been pushed back to their final defensive positions around the central mining shaft. They had lost more than half their fighters, most of their heavy equipment, and all of their advantages except one. They knew exactly where to make their last stand. The central shaft was a natural fortress. It went down 3 kilometers into the planet's crust, with dozens of side tunnels and mining chambers. The colonists had spent years turning it into their industrial heart. Now it would become their final refuge. "How many do we have left?" Taemin asked as the surviving defenders gathered in the main chamber. "Maybe 800 fighters," Wusung reported. "Another 2,000 civilians in the lower tunnels. Medical supplies for about a week if we're careful." "And the Vorthak?" 40,000 warriors plus war machines and air support. They've surrounded the entire shaft system. The numbers were hopeless. But the defenders weren't fighting numbers anymore. They were fighting for something the Vorthak couldn't understand. As night fell on the second day, the Vorthak made their offer. Commander Thrax's voice echoed through the tunnels from speakers they had captured. Creatures of this world. The mechanical translation made his words sound even more threatening. You have fought bravely, but foolishly. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. Continue this resistance, and I will make sure every being dies slowly while watching their loved ones suffer first. In the deep chambers, alien families looked at each other with terror. The children stopped their games. The wounded stopped complaining about their pain. Everyone waited to hear what their leaders would say. Taimin looked around at the mixed group of survivors. Humans, Melodians, Carathians, Skyfish, Xanthari, and others. All different species. All united by the same desire to protect their community. We didn't come to this world to surrender to bullies, he said, his voice carrying through the tunnel system. We came here to build something better, to prove that different species could live together in peace. That dream is worth defending. But, the children, said a Melodian elder, her crystal voice shaking with fear. What about our little ones? Sora stepped forward. Her medical uniform was torn and stained, but her voice was steady. The children will remember that we stood together, human children and alien children, hiding in the same caves, sharing the same food, comforted by the same songs. They'll remember that their parents chose love over fear. A young Carathian warrior, barely old enough to fight, raised his stone fist. My family came here because humans welcomed us. Now I fight beside humans. This is my world too. One by one, the other species added their voices. They would not surrender. They would not abandon each other. They would face whatever came together. Commander Thrax received their answer with rage. His warriors began preparing for the final assault. War machines were positioned at every tunnel entrance. Energy weapons were charged to maximum power. In the deep tunnels, the colony's last defenders prepared for what everyone knew would be their final battle. They checked their weapons, said goodbye to their families, and tried not to think about how hopeless their situation was. But as the third day dawned over Kepler 442b, something else was happening in the darkness between the stars. Something the Vorthak had not expected and could not detect. Junho Lee's desperate message had been received. The morning sun rose over Kepler 442b like any other day, but Taimin Kim knew it would be the last peaceful sunrise the colony would see. He stood on the observation deck of the mining facility, watching the peaceful valley below where 50,000 beings from dozens of different worlds had built their home together. The colony was a miracle of cooperation. Crystal-singing Melodians worked alongside sturdy Carathians in the deep mines. Swift Skyfish delivered supplies through the mountain passes while peaceful Xanthari managed trade and diplomacy. And scattered among them all were fewer than 500 humans who had somehow become the glue holding this diverse community together. Taimin checked his communicator again. Still no response from the Galactic Defense Force. 3 days ago, long-range sensors had detected the approaching Vorthak fleet. Every message sent requesting help had vanished into the void of space. They were alone. The children are asking questions, Sora Park said as she joined him on the deck. Her medical uniform was already stained with the blood of those injured in the morning's panic. What do I tell them? Taimin looked at his friend. Sora had come to this world to help, people to heal instead of harm. Now she might have to watch everything they built get destroyed. Tell them the truth, we protect each other. That's what families do. A low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. In the distance, dark shapes appeared in the sky. The Vorthak fleet had arrived. The ships were massive black rectangles that blocked out portions of the sky. 50 vessels, each one larger than their entire mining complex. As they watched, smaller ships began dropping from the larger ones like deadly rain. All civilians to emergency positions, Taimin spoke into the colony-wide communication system. This is not a drill. All defense volunteers report to your assigned stations. The colony's defense force was a joke by military standards. 200 volunteers with hunting rifles, mining equipment turned into weapons, and industrial vehicles modified with armor plating. Against a Vorthak invasion force, they might as well throw rocks, but they would try anyway. That's what humans. Did Junho Lee burst through the door of the communication center, his young face pale with fear and determination. I got one message out before they jammed our long-range systems, he reported. Sent it on all emergency frequencies. If anyone is listening. Good work, Taemin said, though they all knew help would never arrive in time. The nearest human colony was 3 weeks away. The Galactic Defense Force, if they even cared about one small mining world, would take months to organize a response. The first Vorthak dropships landed in the outer settlements. Through the colony's security cameras, they watched as the alien warriors emerged. Each Vorthak stood 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that could stop most small arms fire. They carried energy weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Ambassador Kelros of the Zenthari rushed into the command center. His normally calm blue skin had turned pale with fear. They're demanding immediate surrender, he said in his musical voice. Total submission to Vorthak authority. They want us to gather in the main square within 1 hour. And if we refuse? Taemin asked, though he already knew the answer. Complete elimination of all life on the planet. They'll strip mine the entire world and sell the population into slavery. Kelros's large eyes filled with tears. My people are pacifists. We don't know how to fight, but we do, Sora said quietly. She had picked up a medical kit and a rifle. We might not win, but we can make them pay for every life they take. The colony's mixed population began moving to defensive positions. Melodian families headed for the deep tunnels where their crystal songs could mask the sounds of hiding children. Carathian workers used their strength to build barricades from mining equipment. Skyfish scouts took to the air to watch for enemy movements. And the humans did what they always did. They adapted. Wu Sung Kang, who had been flying cargo ships between settlements, now coordinated aerial reconnaissance with whatever flying vehicles they could find. Hee-Jin Choi, a teacher who had spent her days educating alien children, organized civilian evacuation routes through the mining tunnels. Mi-young Seo, the colony's botanist, used her knowledge of every cave and tunnel to plan escape routes. The Vorthak gave them 1 hour. They used every minute. Remember? Taemin spoke to the assembled defenders, his voice carrying over their communication system to every human, every alien, every being who chose to stand and fight. We're not trying to win a war. We're buying time for our families to reach safety. Every minute we hold them is another minute for our children to get deeper into the tunnels. The attack began exactly 1 hour after the ultimatum. Vorthak warriors advanced in perfect formation, their energy weapons cutting down anything that moved. The colony's outer defenses lasted exactly 12 minutes. But those 12 minutes mattered. Civilian transports carrying families and children made it to the tunnel entrances. Emergency supplies were moved to underground storage areas. Medical stations were established in natural caves that could be sealed if necessary. The second defensive line was anchored around the industrial complex. Here the defenders had advantages. They knew every pipe, every cable, every maintenance tunnel. When Vorthak warriors tried to advance through the machinery, they found themselves caught in ambushes from directions they never expected. Sora turned the main hospital into a fortress. With the help of Carathian workers, she built barriers from medical equipment and supply containers. When wounded defenders were brought to her, she treated humans and aliens alike, never asking which species they belonged to. The Vorthak had never seen anything like it. In every world they conquered, species fought only for themselves. Humans protected Melodians they had known for mere months. Carathians died defending human children. Skyfish risked their lives to carry wounded aliens to safety. What are these creatures? Commander Thrax demanded as he watched his forces struggle against the seemingly chaotic but effective defense. His warriors were trained to fight armies, not communities that turned every building into a fortress and every civilian into a potential threat. By nightfall, the colony's defenders had been pushed back to the central mining complex. They had lost half their people, but they had also cost the Vorthak more casualties than expected. More importantly, most of the civilians were now safely hidden in the deep tunnels. Tai Min looked around at the mixed group of defenders. Humans, Melodians, Carathians, Skyfish, and a dozen other species. All tired, all scared, all determined to protect each other. Tomorrow they'll try to finish us, he told them. They have the numbers, the weapons, and the advantages. But they don't understand something we do. What's that? Asked a young Carathian who had lost his family in the first attack. Tai Min smiled, the expression strange on his dirt-covered and exhausted face. They don't know what it means to fight for someone else's children. They think strength comes from taking what you want. We know it comes from protecting what you love. As the defenders settled in for what might be their last night, Sora made her rounds through the makeshift medical station. Humans lay next to aliens, sharing water and medical supplies without thought of species or origin. Outside, the Vorthak fleet waited in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring overwhelming force against their desperate defense. Logic said they could not win. Logic said they should surrender and hope for mercy. But humans had never been very good at following logic when the people they cared about were in danger. In the deep tunnels, alien children listened to human lullabies. In the medical stations, human doctors worked alongside alien healers. In the command bunkers, human engineers planned impossible strategies with alien tacticians. Tomorrow, the Vorthak would learn something new about humans. They would learn that some species don't fight just to survive. Some species fight because it's right.